Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbender, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from UdoU. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you tuned in. Today we have a very special guest. It's Mr. Steven Mangual. Hi, Steven. How are you?
Hi. Thank you so much. I'm okay. I'm glad. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here with me and making this time. I know that there have been a lot of events and marches and activism and advocacy, and you are like a diehard criminal justice reform advocate. You've spent a good portion of your life really advocating, right, for alternative ways to deal with the criminal justice system, and I love when I read your profile about your approaches, justice of love, right, or justice through love, and
Yeah.
I think that's really really powerful. And so let's kick this off by just sharing. I would love for you to share a little bit about how you landed doing the work that you do, and where you're. I mean, you're from the Bronx. We already went through that
Wonderful.
offline. My family is also from the Bronx, and I lived there for a little bit during my childhood. So we have those common roots. But talk to me a little bit about how you started your journey in
Mhm.
this work, and then what brought you to Florida. That's the other
Yeah.
thing that I'm curious about too, right?
Yes. Thank you so much. Thanks for the intro and for the accolades. I appreciate it. Um, when I listen to you, it just kind of reminds me of how old I am.
Hey, I'm right with you. I'm right there with you,
So,
Papa.
but I joke around with people about my very first interaction with the criminal legal system or the criminal justice system, and how that was actually the very beginning of the trajectory of my life up until today, and that it wasn't even where it was directly me, but I was impacted because it was my mom. So my
Mhm.
mom, there was an episode where she had gotten into this altercation, and the cops were called, and my mother was arrested. And I was probably about 9, 10 years old at the time. I'm thinking about the time frame because it was shortly after that we wound up moving into the neighborhood where I spent most of my adolescence up until young adulthood prior to being incarcerated. And so I moved there when I was like right turning in 11 years old. And so
Mhm.
when I wind up seeing and being experienced to that, you know, that kind of attack, that kind of invasion into our home. Yeah, some people might say it was justified because it was, a crime committed and the cops were called, and I get that. Um, Today, I don't really agree with a lot of that as someone who believes in really in alternatives,
Mhm.
first. Um, but yeah, that was my very first introduction, and so it was antagonistic. I saw the police in such a way where it was not difficult for me at 12 years old to now be involved, in street activities, selling drugs, and getting involved, with drug use and alcohol use and that kind of stuff at a very young age. And anytime I would even have any experience or even witness police or any type of government agent, it was always where I was disconnected from them because of the initial experience, and because of not just that just because of my lifestyle, and because I've been growing up. Now I'm growing up with a single parent. We're poor. I'm young. It's during an era where people like to talk about the era of racial profiling in New York City, and what was taking place there. Like it's something that they read about.
Mhm.
But for those of us who grew up under that, So it's not because, oh yeah, because I saw my mother get arrested and I hate the cops at 19 years old. No, there was a lot that was happening. We've had, very, very some really horrific experiences with the police,
Mm-hmm.
growing up in the Bronx. I spent some time in the South Bronx. And so, my mom was always struggling with her addiction and with her language, because she never really spoke English that well. So anytime she had to go to an appointment, to her face to face, yo tenía que ir con ella. I was the one that was the oldest. I'm the oldest of three, and I was the only boy, and I was fluently bilingual, and so I was my mother's advocate. And so it was a weird thing because today when I think back about why I do what I do, I do what I do really because of my mom's training, the
Mm-hmm.
experience that she gave me, and what I witnessed as a child when it came to drugs, alcohol, violence, and that kind of stuff. So um that is really the very beginning. And of course, when I was arrested the first time at 14 years old, and then I was
Wow.
arrested maybe, yeah, we were
Mm-hmm.
very young, and it was a kind of thing where it was a crime of poverty, really, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we were doing, as we was four, we was it was three of us. We were all 14 years old, and we all, were trying to figure out how are we gonna, compete. We weren't selling drugs like that at this point. This was early 80s, right? And so we wanted to go. We used to steal stuff in stores to sell them, so we could make, and then so we could buy clothes and buy sneakers, and buy a little
Mm-hmm.
chivas, you know.
Yeah.
And so it was that kind of thing. So I was arrested at 14, and then I was arrested a few more times, but the subsequent times were for drugs,
Mm-hmm.
drug possession, and then initially assault. And so it kind of like it really did escalate. When I think back about how I ended up, committing the crime that I committed at 20 years old, it was definitely an escalation. It was years and years and years of so many things, so much witnessing abuse, seeing abuse, being abused, being an abuser, being on both sides, because that's the truth. Um, and so, you know, it wasn't. I don't think it was a really illogical and unreasonable leap, for me to now, commit this god awful crime and wind up incarcerated for 14 years at the age of 20. And I think it was during that time where my activism really found its purpose, and I really
Mm-hmm.
I don't I'm not grateful I'm not one of those guys that say, oh, prison saved me. No, hell no. That was the worst experience, and I don't wish that on anyone.
Right.
I'm post incarceration 15 years and 2 weeks, and I'm still struggling with that trauma.
Yeah.
And so it's not something that leaves you, and yet it's because of that and all of that, a sum total that I do what I do today. Uh,
Yeah. So it's all that it's really it seems to me just like an environment, right? That's it's almost
mhm,
like it's there.
yeah.
You're in this environment that it's almost there's you can't see beyond that. You
Hmm.
just it's because this just is the reality that you're immersed in. And
Hmm.
so wow, so then there's no way to or at least in your view, right?
Right, in my view,
As a
and in
child
some of
and
because
growing.
everyone, because we did have other peers who grew up in our block, in our neighborhood. My friend Noel became a police officer for a while, although
Mhm.
he didn't enjoy that. No other story. But he
Mhm.
did 25 years, and he did his career. I had some other people that they ran businesses, you know, um, worked generations. I went back recently, and my neighbors are still there,
Mm.
with their kids, still living. So it's like, and they never were incarcerated. Yeah, they struggle poverty
Yeah.
and with the same
Mhm.
kind. But at the same time, for me it was different because of many reasons.
Yeah.
You know, I reacted differently, and I don't put the blame on anything. I take accountability. I did what I did.
Mhm.
Yes, there were many factors that came into play that were beyond my control
Mhm.
that played a role in my even, being able to have access to a gun at such a young age.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't, none of us manufacture weapons. Being able to have access to so much drugs and alcohol, so much cocaine and crack. I mean, we already know that, this racist drug war wasn't of our making either. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, there's a lot. At the same time, yes, I made the choices that I made. So I definitely believe in accountability, but at the same time, it's a dual accountability, you know.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. Well, you just answered my next question because I was going to ask you, you know, what about those people, right, that say, well, you know, si hiciste algo, you did something, then you need to,
crime,
you know,
do the
pay the
time.
price for it, right? You need to be held accountable, you know,
Hmm.
for the wrongs you've committed. But there's something to be said about, you know, and I think this is part, and I don't know, correct me. This is why I'm so excited to have you, you know, on the show. Is there's something to be said as someone that went through that, right?
Hmm.
That the transgression committed
Hmm.
and the penalty or the, you know, the, you know, the
Punish.
effect, the result, the consequence that you
Okay.
suffer, you know,
Hmm.
sometimes are not
Hmm.
balanced or not fair. And also that these options or alternatives that you propose too.
Hmm.
I mean, I think that one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was, you know, that first intervention, how
Yeah.
that's an opportunity that perhaps
Hmm.
presents itself unexpected, or if it's a first time offense, you know,
Hmm.
then how do you navigate that without police and without violence and without imprisonment? You know, what do you advocate for?
So that's the question. That is the ultimate question that we have been ignoring. You know,
Mhm,
really, as even as a community of folks trying to figure out what to do with this thing we call mass incarceration, when we had upwards of 2.4 million people incarcerated in the whole U.S., with over 60 something million people affected in the whole U.S. You know, where you have um, police not being held accountable, where you have all of these environments where just the lack of even something as basic as a community center where they can go to, right, and
mhm,
and be exposed to something different. So I mean, it is definitely layered, but I don't have the answer. I can tell you
mhm,
that I sit here today as someone who believes in abolition, not only because I was in a cage, um, but because I've also been involved in alternatives and seen the successes around alternatives, even for young men during an adolescent period who are those who will commit acts of violence.
mhm,
And so um, alternatives to incarceration should not even be a thing. It should not even be a thing. Alternatives to incarceration, diversion. Because when you think about it, our job for those who advocate for looking at answering the question of crime, especially youth crime,
mhm,
specifically, in adolescent, um, in a way where where the alternative is the cage.
mhm,
And so we wouldn't even we'd be out of it. We should be out. Our goal, and this is not mine, but I was recently talking to some other people that have been doing this work for a very long time, and just to backtrack, I have I've worked with conflict resolution, anger management,
mhm,
like I've done this kind of work. I've done diversionary work. I've worked with folks that are at the front end and at the back end of reentry. But for 3 years, I ran an alternative incarceration program for youth who were charged with violent crimes. I did that for 3 years, and we were successful. Super successful. Where they were not sentenced to a cage; they were sentenced to a community-based organization that embraced them
mhm.
and showed them an alternative. And even after they did what they did, you see,
Right.
because so we're so oh man brainwashed in this country to um respond with punishment first, respond with isolation first, respond
Mhm,
moving this individual, and then we look at it from a pathology because we say there's something wrong with that person, with that
mhm,
individual. That's not the case.
mhm,
That's that medical model where we oh, there's something wrong with me, doc. Oh, the doctor looks at you and says, yes, there's something wrong with you, so let's try to fix you, right?
mhm.
that
Yeah.
that may make sense, but that medical model doesn't work when it comes to us trying to respond to social ills. Us trying to respond to the issue of crime, crime, which is
Mhm,
socialized. And I'm so glad you asked that, because to backtrack when you said, oh, if don't do the crime, if you're not ready to do the time, um, crime is a social construct, right? Steal $5,
Mhm.
you're steal 5 million, you're an embezzler, or you're a part of,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
If you're part of Enron and you steal a whole generation of people's retirement funds, are you a criminal?
Mhm.
Um, and this is not to take away any of that. I'm just saying that
Right.
this is the reality is like the answer is not looking at it from a punishment perspective first.
Right.
Looking at, okay, what is happening? Because the reality is, right, by the time I was arrested at 20 years old for, a very violent crime, by the time I got to that point, uh, there was a lot of time and where other interventions could have taken place, and it could have prevented a lot of that. But
Right.
by that point, and so, but then, what is the answer? The answer is always going to be isolation, punishment, throw them away. And the reality is, like, we're realizing now, 40 plus years into this thing we call mass incarceration, that the trauma that's visited upon not just those of us who go through these systems, but our families,
Yeah. And the children.
the
Mhm.
children, our
Mhm.
communities.
Mhm.
There's so much collateral damage that takes place that we know about, where we should be um, having this conversation everywhere.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be where the prosecutors. I worked with prosecutors I worked with prosecutors in the Bronx for 3 years and in Brooklyn.
Mhm.
And I know that it could be done. I know that a prosecutor could say, "Oh, we should be locking this kid up," and then I say, "I don't think so," and let me tell you why not.
Right.
Let me tell you what our plan is to make sure that even though he may have slipped at this point, and you as a prosecutor think that it's time to, how they say it. Sometimes they say
The
pull the trigger,
punish. The punish. Yeah.
punish. But there, every part of the language is horrible. It's, oh, I don't want to pull the trigger. I'm like, oh my god, like that's what you want to use.
Yeah.
But it's that. It's like it takes a community to be able to see things differently, and be able to say, you know what, why not
Yeah.
put him, her, or him in a diversionary program, right? Why not give them
Mhm.
that chance?
Yeah.
Um, and and
And
and it's sad. It's sad that the reality is, like, it's always a racial component, because the United this system is a direct descendant of chattel slavery, direct descendant. And anyone who doesn't believe that, all you have to do is just look inside our prisons throughout the
yeah.
U.S. It's full of blacks and Latinos and non-whites. And then the problem with so many states like Florida that do not um, gather data properly when it comes to Latinos and those of us who live in
Yes, I know.
that
Mhm.
are the numbers. So the numbers are not right anyway. And
Yeah.
this is not just here. This is
Yep.
everywhere.
Yep.
But to go back to the initial, it's those of us who believe in alternatives, it's because we know that they work.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen it. I had a child that was 17 years old when he was with me. He
Mhm.
committed his crime when he was 16. He was in Rikers Island for like a year, right?
Mm.
Came out 17, turned 18 with me. Like, yes, it was a serious assault that he committed. But when we sat down and we had a restorative justice circle with the harm party that he harmed, and we sat there and they looked at each other and they saw that they were the same people, just different generations. They
Mhm.
saw they saw the beauty in each other.
Mm.
And I remember, I never forget this, man, because this was one of my very first circles and my most impactful. This has to be like 4.5 years ago. And he said, Steven, look at this beautiful young man. Look at how handsome he is. I don't want him to go to jail. He has his whole life ahead of him.
And this is the person that was hurt by the young man.
He was in a
Wow.
coma. He was in a coma for 2 weeks.
Oh
And he's
wow.
sitting there looking at him, and he's like, mira, mira,
Wow.
mira este chamaquito tan guapo que es, tan alto, y
Yeah.
el futuro que él tiene delante de él. Yo no quiero parar eso. And I
Yeah.
was like, but you know what? The reality is, like, most of us, we don't want, even those of us who've been harmed, we don't want to punish, because we know that doesn't work. So we don't even want to punish those
Mhm.
who harmed us.
Yeah.
Because we
And
do
so,
the work.
what are the alternatives when you talk about these programs and
Yeah.
interventions, and what does that look like? Because people, that are not doing this kind of work don't know que es eso. Like, what does that look like in real life, right? These interventions.
Hmm. Well, I've been involved, like the program that I was telling you about now. The way it works is there's a community-based organization set up in the borough that has a relationship with the district attorney's office. and
Mm-hmm.
if and if the district attorney's office is progressive, forward looking, and understanding, that diversionaries work, they develop
Hmm.
this relation. What they do is, some of them, if they're really good, they actually have alternative to incarceration departments inside, like the Bronx. In the
Hmm.
Bronx, it's a little different. And in the Bronx, they actually have an alternative incarceration. Doesn't really exist in a lot of the places, especially here in
Hmm.
Florida. But it's really simple when you think about it. So a young man gets arrested for committing a violent crime. He gets booked, central booking. He goes, of course, depending on where he comes from, which for the most part is a poor neighborhood where he's not going to be able to afford bail, which is a
Hmm.
failed system. Bail is just it just keeps poor people in jail. It's a
Hmm.
horrible cash bail, because when people who have money, they don't have to worry about bailing out. They always bail
Right.
out.
Right.
So the child is facing a serious crime now, probably for the very first time, and he has an assigned attorney. You know,
Hmm.
Sixth Amendment right, right? You have the right to counsel. Usually, it's a public defender because you can't afford that either. So now
Hmm.
the job is the public. It's the public defender's job to make sure first that uh, justice is served, like there's no violations of any rights. And so, but the reality is, like, it's really up to what lawyer you get, what public defender you get, and whether they're looking
Hmm.
to force you to cop out and get rid of your case right away, or do they really want to represent you? Are they really interested in the truth? Because, not that that matters, but it really is helpful, especially when you
Hmm.
deal with young men who may be caught up in the system innocently, which a lot of
Hmm.
them do. But yeah, so now the public defender looks for a program if the charges are a merit a program. Sometimes, for the most part, initially it's a drug program. Someone gets arrested for drugs, right away, let's get them a drug program and put them into either residential, outpatient, whatever. So that's been happening, and there's drug courts everywhere. That we have. But for someone charged with a violent crime, and where the alternative to incarceration program that the lawyer is looking for, it's a program that is outside in the community. It's not a residential.
Hmm.
It's not parole. It's a community-based organization that's going to provide, um, in this case, let's say, where I work, a curriculum, a 15-month curriculum based on, all kinds of things around alternatives to violence, how domestic violence, knowing culture, understanding culture, where do you come from, where are you going, understanding your civic duty, understanding history and your relationship, understanding violence and your, 'cause specifically if your crime is violence, why did you commit the act of violence, right?
Hmm.
Understanding violence in that way, knowing that violence is
Hmm.
something that's learned. It's learned and is amplified in this society. It's a weird thing in this society where they tell you, don't kill anyone unless you're killing for us. So it's it's a
Hmm.
weird that
Yeah.
it's a weird, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the reality. But it is not a very difficult thing. And there are so
Hmm.
many alternative programs throughout, sadly, a lot of them in the Northeast. There's a lot through California. We have, in the Midwest. But when you come down to like the mid and down the southern part, it's really difficult because,
Yeah.
mainly because of the politics, and because we're so used to um, locking someone and throwing away the key, and an alternative
Right.
is strange to people. But the reality is, like, there are so many successful programs like the one that I'm talking about. I mean, and that's at the point where I still consider that front end work, because it's still, before the person gets incarcerated, even though they came in
Yeah.
contact with them and may even have a few months or a year in the jail waiting for a program, an alternative program. But
Yeah.
there are also so many other front end diversionary programs that are super successful. Like, for instance, when you're talking about youth gang and violence prevention, the Credible Messengers initiative is, exploding throughout the United States. It started in New York City, and now it's huge. It's around 18, 19 states, and this is something where people who are directly impacted serve as responders to violence.
Mm.
Really sometimes working in conjunction with departments of in New York City, Department of Corrections, Department of Probation, you know,
Yeah.
and it is an intervention that works. And I know it sounds strange to people, right? But but let me tell you, as someone who experienced this growing up
Hmm.
personally on that side, as someone who an academic, I've been out here 15 plus years, doing
Hmm.
this work. I was on parole for 3 years. They released me, for good behavior. And my last
Hmm.
PO said, Stephen, parole is not for you. I was like, I get it. I was in school. I was married. I was working full time. I was on my mission already. It's
Yeah.
different. Everyone, I was privileged though in that way because I met a lot of great people who really showed me the way and pushed me and nudged me along. So it's not me.
Hmm.
And so, but again, that's the loving community I'm talking about. Because even if
Right.
I didn't want to go to school, even if I was feeling depressed, and even if I didn't want to move forward, my community said, "No, Stephen, vámonos, levántate,
Right.
and let's do this because this is who we are and this is what we're doing." And
Right.
sometimes, that's all we need is a reminder,
Yeah. And
but
someone to believe,
yeah,
right? That
that's all we need.
yeah.
I know it sounds foreign. Someone
Yeah.
gets shot, someone gets shot and killed, and we show up and try to and we are really there to console, to provide service, and to prevent retaliation, and it is
Hmm.
working just as much as the diversionary programs are working, where we graduate children who were charged with crimes, and after it gets expunged, they're able to. I mean, we've had kids get full-time jobs for the first time. Go to school, go to college. One of my kids became an EMT. You know,
Hmm.
and
And
so
so how did you get involved? So you're in the system, right? You paid your dues. You finally are able to leave, right? The cage,
I
right?
got released.
Exactly, you get released, right? And you're able to begin, but what does that beginning look like? And what does it look like for someone like you that discovers, right, your sense of purpose? Because
Mhm.
that's not easy. I mean, living a life of purpose and then having to also start from nada, from like
Yeah,
zero, right? With
yeah.
this thing hanging over you, right? And trying to just put food on the table. How do you do that?
Hmm. Not alone.
Mm.
So that's my first thing when I think about it. Not alone. Too many of us think when we come home, um, that we survived that. We survived that. So we
Mm-hmm.
could do it on our own. That's that individualistic, thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when for many of us, we didn't survive the prison system or the prison journey alone. If it wasn't for other like-minded people who said, Stephen, enroll in the college program, get out of the yard.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what you're doing with them guys, with the Latin Kings and in the yard. I know you love them and you're in money, they're great people, but some of them are, not on the
Mm-hmm.
same path. And that's across the board. If it wasn't that I had those interventions, even in prison,
Mm-hmm.
I would not have even had the fortitude um, to be homeless after 14 years in prison, um, and not have any real work history. Only have 12 college. No, I had 24 college credits because they took away tap
Mm-hmm.
and pay when I was enrolled in the college program, and really no job.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it wasn't that I had a community that really cared about my success and really wanted me and believed in me,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the thing. The people who would call me, even initially, because I was working 2 weeks after being home or less, and then I
Mm-hmm.
was working my career job a month after coming home. A month, 2000. I came home October 2006. By November 2006, I was working as a case manager technician doing HIV Cobra case management, comprehensive
Wow.
working. That was the greatest lesson. But I wouldn't even have been called, and people wouldn't even give me a chance had they not seen something in me as well.
Mm-hmm.
They saw that I was open. They saw that I was bringing something. And
Mm-hmm.
so even though my very first real interview for that job, my resume was a bunch of stuff that I did while I was in prison,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But guess what? It was a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
including 2 semesters in college, like 100 certificates, all kinds of trainings, 2,000 hours with the Department of Labor. I was already like, I didn't know what I was gonna do when I came out, so I had to be like a generalist.
Yeah. A
But
generalist. Yeah. Yeah.
I knew it was gonna be advocacy though. I always did,
Yeah.
because that
But
started even before.
yeah, but do you see, I mean, in everybody talks about the power of education and
Yes.
about, and it's awesome to see, right, that you took advantage of these opportunities
Hmm.
to build yourself up, right? Because
Yeah.
then that also, I'm sure, fuels self-esteem, you know helps you elevate, your how you project yourself, and
Hmm.
also, you learn so many skills like soft skills, and how to articulate your thoughts, and how to deal with people. I mean, is that all part of, what you were able to tap into during the time you spent in prison?
Oh, for sure. If it wasn't, the very first certificate I got was for a program called the um, Alternative Surveillance Project, and these were the Quakers that were at that.
Mm-hmm.
This is 1994.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, they were already inside the prisons doing this work for over 20 years. You
Yeah.
know, and so as far as and today it still exists. And so the program is really based on cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my very first introduction. I didn't know that. I know what CBD. I didn't know any of that. I just knew I was in here. I needed a certificate because I just committed a violent crime, and I'm open, and I like the Quakers, and they're great people, and I just want to be around good people, you know. And
Yes.
it was like that, and then all of a sudden it was like, holy crap! Like, I like this,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm good at it. And
Mhm.
it's not that I'm saying I'm good at it. It's like people are telling me, Stephen, you should think about going and taking the advanced, because that was the basic. Take the
Yeah.
advanced, then take the trainer for trainer, become a trainer, an AVP trainer. I was like, really?
Yeah. That's
And
fantastic.
here's
And
the
so, yeah. And so, one last question. What role do you see, like the police having,
hmm
right? In transforming,
yeah.
in transforming the way we approach um coming in to support like a crime, like not support, like stop a crime,
hmm
or domestic violence, or a dispute, or someone that just freaking lost it, right? And so then what would be helpful from that standpoint, because a lot of people are, talk about defund the police, and they
hmm
they go a little bit, loquito, when you start using, but from just without the labels and all of that, what are some of the practical steps,
hmm
or like a first step, of consideration that maybe you'd like to throw out there, in terms of, people on the other side, the ones that are basically,
Yeah.
making sure that the rules are followed,
Yeah.
supposedly, right? So yeah.
First of all, historically, we have to really, as a society, whether it be those who are in government, those who are in, running businesses, organizations, tech, whatever. Like, we have to reckon with the fact that, when we're looking at the police, where this came from, right?
Mhm.
Um, you know, uh, these were, the very first people who were assigned to chase after those African people who were just freed after the 1865. And so, not to say that the police officer that I see outside, the sheriff that I see here in Florida, it's not, that is not, I'm not saying that you're responsible for the Texas Rangers and that stuff, and the black and the people that were, during slavery, and the black codes, and even those. it's still happening though today. And I mean, we see how the images of how they've been treating our Haitian folks in the border over there. So it's horrible,
Yeah.
And so understanding that, just come to a reckoning and be like, this happened and this is a reality, and we need to now shift the narrative and shift the relationship that we have, because we do have shared values. You know,
Hmm.
even people who are yelling, defund, 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 you know, they understand that, they have shared values with those same police that they're trying to figure out how to develop a new and different relationship with.
Right.
I was in an event recently where um it was one of the first coming out. It was a new community center in Orlando,
Hmm.
and it was this thing where the community center wanted to bring out the community to meet the sheriff's Orange County Sheriff's Department,
Hmm.
and but they were a specific department that actually does community liaison work. Most of them were
Mm.
most of them were young, they were in it with us, they were all so it was so you know that's a step.
Yeah.
That's a step, because when they came to us, they knew who we were. I was there with another formerly incarcerated, former notorious gangster from Miami, who now has
Hmm.
been doing youth crime prevention work and is this incredible messenger here. Um, they knew who we were,
Hmm.
and they knew that we didn't believe that they should be um criminalizing our youth and punishing them first. That we represent an alternative and we live an alternative, and so when they were with us, they got it and they understood. And so that's just one step, but we also know it. I know what their job is, what the real
Yeah.
job, but at the same time, if we can really develop that kind of community and communication and access, and um let them come to us,
Hmm.
let them come to where the kids are,
Hmm.
listen to them, hear from them. What do you think because I even me I'm 49 years old. I don't have the answers for a 17-year-old going through what he's going through in Pine Hills today.
Right.
I'm here to just provide whatever I can in everything that I do, and help them see that the answer really comes within them. And if we could formulate that, if we can help them formulate it, and we can help them bring it out, if we can nurture it, if we can protect it, um
Hmm.
then that's what we should be doing, not just as activists, but the police too, the
Hmm.
government. We have a responsibility, but and they have to understand that even though they're part of the system, and for whatever reason, I don't blame them to for being a part of it, because everybody has to provide for themselves and their families in this society, and it's
Hmm.
not you know um they gotta accept. You don't have to agree, but accept that the system that you represent has been failing black and brown folks across this nation for many,
Hmm.
many, many, for a long time. And
Yes.
so even as representatives of it, let's also together talk about alternatives.
Right. I love
That's
it.
all it is.
Yes, totally. Well, I'm glad you're here in the Central Florida region. I'm
Oh, me
hoping that
too.
we can meet sometime soon and actually have an idea. I have to introduce you to a friend of mine.
Okay.
That had this
Well, my
idea for
office is
some.
in Orlando. I live in Kissimmee, but Florida is
Yeah.
my home and Florida is my mission. Until we totally flip this, you know,
This thing out.
on
We
its
got to
head.
flip this baby out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we have way too many. We have 176,000 too many people incarcerated in the state.
Yes, wow.
So
That's incredible. Yeah. And people that know clearly, a lot of them are able to turn their lives around, right? Given the right resources and the right sense of community and the right sense of we care, right?
yeah, it has to
Because
be
for the
real.
yeah,
It has to be real.
totally. It's like for the most part, people just want someone to give a shit, right?
That's
Let's
it.
just be real.
That's
That's
it.
that's what it boils down to. Whoever you are, you could be like the CEO of a company, right? Or you
Hmm.
could be, a kid, riding his skateboard, right? Through
Hmm.
the neighborhood. Everybody wants the same thing, someone just
Right.
to care. Yeah.
Mhm.
So this was really fantastic. Thank you so much, Stephen, for
Thank
taking the time
you.
to
I'm so
sharing your story, and the work that you're doing is very powerful. And yeah, I'm gonna definitely reach out, offline because
Okay.
I think it's something that we can work on. Okay.
All right. Looking
Okay.
forward to it.
Chévere. Gracias.
Cuídate.
You too.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.